I think privilege is a real thing. I mean, like, you know, you get all these different perspectives. It's like, oh, you're not good at this, or you're not good at this, or you're good at this, or you're good at this. Like, it's like people matter, like, with their perspectives and, like, their opinions on, like, what you are and what you're doing. But it really matters, like, what you think, like I've said. But, like, it's like, for example, like, if you're going out for a sports team and you go on the sports team and you do this, that, and the other, and people don't see that, then you value yourself and you be able to, like, grow within yourself. So I feel like pretty privilege is a real thing. I mean, some people look at you and go, oh, like, you know, maybe you're not so good at this, but you're good at this, or you don't do good in this, or you don't do good in that, and then you grow and learn from it. So there's definitely pretty privilege and lots of different perspectives and topics. So.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Pretty privilege is a real thing.
Yeah.
Coming from the food service industry, you'd have the pretty servers.
That
that
they
could
put
do
out
no
up front.
wrong.
They put out. They do it.
They could spill water in a man's lap and still get a $20 tip.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you know, girl comes to the table, she doesn't smile, hair's not combed, apron's dirty, more or less gets told to get away from the table.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
You want to add something, Tara?
I don't know. I mean, I agree with everything everybody's saying. On top of that, I mean, I have seen where, you know, you've seen on movies and stuff, but even in real life, you know, the club's full, but then you get this really hot model chick who comes to the door, oh yeah, come on in, but you get somebody who is just average or, you know, isn't so, in their eyes, so pretty, oh no, you know, we're full, you can't get in. But even with that, servers, bartenders, they always have, like, you know, you always notice the bartenders drawing in the patrons in the bar, always there, you know, pretty ones. So I do think that it's a thing. Have not experienced myself, but I do know people that have, and I do agree that it is in certain industries definitely a thing.
It's a real thing. I mean, I remember even when I worked in corporate America, it was some people, it's like, they do not know what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. They do not know what they're doing. Why are they here? What did they lie on the resume? How did they get here? And they get promotions, right? And it's like, what is happening right now? It's a real thing. So what do you all think? Is pretty privilege? Yeah.
Well, I would like to pose the question, what would our world look like if we were all blind?
Oh, I don't know.
And it would totally change the way we judge other people.
Yeah.
And the way we see other people. Our world would be so different.
Yeah.
Why can't we imagine that we're blind and look at people with blind eyes and base what we hear and the actions that they do to develop any kind of an opinion on them?
Yeah.
Why are we using our eyes? Because I didn't hear anything positive. And so I wonder what the world would be like if we were all blind.
Yeah.
I think it might be a beautiful world.
Do you think so? If we all were?
I think so, because we'd remove a lot of the judgment
But you know
and
what?
judging.
Did you ever watch the movie Ray? Did you ever watch that movie Ray with Jamie Foxx? Was that Jamie Foxx?
Yes.
Ray? Okay, I thought so. But do you remember? So in that movie, because you just made me think about that. When he wanted to date women, because you know Ray Charles, he was playing Ray Charles, so he's blind, and when he wanted to date women, he would feel their wrists. So even he would judge them by what he felt, and if it felt a little bigger, he would send them away. But if it was smaller, he would bring them on in. And so it's like.
Okay, I wish you hadn't told me that. I really like Ray Charles. I love his music. Come on.
I'm sorry. My point is that we all find a way to like measure people, right, and to size people up. And I think it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, Adam, how you know, like the hunters and the gatherers. We are all we are vision people. We judge and we assess people by what we see. Unfortunately, but it is our nature, right? Go ahead, Sarah. But thank you for that, Paul.
Yeah.
You made me think about that moment in that movie. But
That's a good thought experiment. I really like that, Paul. I think that we would find a way or a reason to judge if we didn't have sight, unfortunately. I think it's partly just the human instinct to understand the world by categorizing it. That doesn't
Is that the way we're raised?
I don't know that it is,
or
because I
educated,
think
or
when
where
we're
does it come
little,
from?
we want to understand the world by, we look to our caregivers like, okay, where does this go? What category do I put things in? I think it's a pretty normal human impulse. It does not have to mean value judgment, though. That I do think has to do with being raised. So our fat phobia, for instance, if we want to speak back to that, that is because we're in a culture that is fat phobic. There are plenty of cultures that aren't. There have historically been cultures that weren't, and
Right.
that my body would have been amazing in those cultures.
No, they look at people in some parts of
Yeah.
the world where it's like you basically they equate that to like wealth.
Right.
And yes.
Because I could afford to eat as much as I wanted,
Yes.
in their opinion,
And they-
right?
yeah.
But I think that's it. I wish there was a way to say we could be less judgmental.
Yeah.
But I do think that partly it's just the human impulse to understand and to categorize in our brains.
Yes.
I do think pretty privilege is a thing. I don't know that it's any more of a privilege than the other privileges we also know exist. So it does exist. It certainly is at play in social spaces, but so are other privileges.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so you're using the word privilege, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people utilize pretty privilege as entitlement.
Well,
And Kirk Cousins gives this Big Ten speech. I've watched it 1,000 times, and it's about the difference between privilege and entitlement.
Yeah.
And when people feel entitled, problems happen, because viewing life as an entitlement, that they think they're entitled to something, whereas if you see everything as a privilege. And so when you say pretty privilege, I understand what you're saying. It allows privileges that people then transfer into entitlement.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong. At least I
sure.
feel it is.
And we allow it in society, right? I mean, people get away with things because we allow them to get away with things. And
Yeah.
let's be honest, some of us have used it, right? I mean, can we be real here? We've used it, right? You use different privileges sometimes when you feel like it best will work for you and benefit you. I want to make sure we get to all this stuff because it's so much, and I love this stuff. So toxic masculinity, I got to get here because that is something that everybody is talking about right now, right? We call look at your face. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Are you ready?
I am ready. I love this. Toxic masculinity, right? And it's something that is used all the time, and it's really interesting because I want to understand it more. I want to understand because I feel like people are using it all the time now, just like narcissists, right? I'm so sick of hearing people call everybody narcissists. It's like, you don't know the definition. That does not, anyway. So that's not on the topic tonight. But toxic masculinity, do you think that, do you think it's a real thing is the first question. And then do you think that we are overusing that? Are we overusing it?
How do you define it?
Me?
Yes.
You don't want to know how I define it because I don't think that everybody that people call toxic.
It's your subject. You have to define it. Come on.
No, I don't. I'm not here to define. You guys are. But I will say that I do not feel that everybody who shows a sense of strong masculinity is toxic. So I want to know what you all think. What makes it toxic? What makes masculinity toxic? That's what I want to know.
So, tell you a little story about me. In our society, we as men, we're not supposed to cry. We're not supposed to show as much emotion. And this has been passed down from generation to generation.
Yes.
Now, do we have the same emotions? Yes. Do men get sad? Yes. So when I've had family members die, I automatically went to the fact, okay, I need to be the strong one. Mm-hmm. My grandparents died in 2015, one in May, one in November, and I wanted to be the strong one for my family because that's what society tells me I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So rather than getting out and saying, I hurt, my grandparents just died, I was really close to them, instead of doing that, and actually getting those emotions out and processing them, I bottled them up. And what happened, I went right back to substance abuse, which it's brushing it under the rug. I didn't have to deal with it, I didn't have to feel it at the time, and I could still be strong, right? Because that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, yes, and I want to get to that, because my question, after we answer this question, is, do we create some of these, do we create these toxic environments by doing just that? Do we create it as a society? Because we blame the man, and that's what I feel about it. We blame the man sometimes for being that way, but then we teach him he can't show. So then what happens is, it happens just like that, where it's now suppressed, and then when it finally comes out, it looks toxic, right?
See, this is why I'm not allowed to watch a Hallmark movie in public.
You can't cry in public. I'm sorry. Okay. Paul. Okay. What? Anybody else have anything on that topic?
Yes, I think the term toxic masculine is just used to call people names.
Okay, tell me.
Because
I'm trying to.
here's an example. Let's say we're out at the club and we're dancing. Man bumps into you. He's mad because you spilled his drink. Am I supposed to not protect you from him? Because that would label me toxic. You'd want me to be toxic to the maximum level at that point.
Right. Right.
I feel it doesn't exist.
So you feel like men are kind of vilified when they operate, tell me if I'm wrong, operate in their natural instinct? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, even to the point to where, if you're out with your son and your son is crying, typical term is the man up. It's the man up. You stop crying and you man up. You brush it off.
But that's are you saying that's harmful, or are
No.
you saying that's good?
That's good.
It's good to tell a man to man up.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I would disagree, but I respect your right to
Go
hold that
for
opinion.
it. Go for it. I'm ready for it, girl.
No, I just think that, honestly, I think toxic masculinity harms men, maybe even more than it harms women. Maybe that's unpopular. I think that the way that when we raise men, telling them that their emotions are not allowed, then the only emotion available to them is anger. And anger is a violent, it often expresses itself in violence. And so I don't think that, see, it's so interesting the way that the question was phrased, because I don't think of toxic masculinity as me shouting something at men for being a certain way. I'm more shouting at the system for failing us all. The system that says that men can't, oh, thank you.
Well, so you're on a roll tonight. Oh my goodness.
I just have a loud mouth. I think the system says that women, well, don't even get me started, but that system that is harmful also just tells men that they can't be the full version of themselves. And I think everyone loses when we're not all allowed to feel our emotions. And I wouldn't say that it would be wrong to stand up in that situation that you mentioned. I obviously am in favor of being protected when I'm being mistreated. But to me, that isn't toxic. What would be toxic is somebody flying into a rage for no reason, or stuffing their emotions and turning to substance abuse instead. I just think the system is flawed.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And the thing is that there are people who are labeling the men, not the system, as being the toxic ones. And I think that it does go back to that part of it, that the society, all of us, create these toxic situations. Because I think that if a man chooses to be in his masculinity, I don't see anything wrong with that. Just like me as a female, I want to be in my femininity. I say it 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 more. I love when people open the door for me. I have no problem with that. I will glide through gracefully, yes, and allow the door to be open. I have no problem with that. I don't want to carry a bunch of bags. I have no problem with my husband dropping me off and saying, just sit in the lobby and I'll go get you. I have no problem with that, right? And then I have no problem with someone who wants to carry out the bags. Go for it. I spent many years doing that. I have no problem letting that go, right? So with that said, I think that we create these situations. But did you want to add anything? I want to make sure everybody says something.
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm pretty middle of the road. I mean, on both sides of it, it does become toxic, as was stated, when for generations and generations growing up, men or boys are always told, boys don't cry, don't be a sissy, man up, all of those types of things. And again, bottling it up, like Adam said, there is really only anger. Some men, now not all men, they could be brought up like that, and still, some men choose to be able to openly show emotion. But the toxic part of it is that, to where it's drilled in your head, don't be a sissy, man up, and then you just internalize that, and then one day, where's it gonna go? It is gonna blow up. So that's the toxic part of it to me. On the other side of it, I'm with you, Aaron. I love, the men role of, carrying the heavy stuff, opening the doors for you, like doing the man stuff in the relationship. So, that's where I'm at with that.
Carry the heavy things. I have no problem doing that. With them doing that. And I want to kind of bring something up to that, the other part of this, the hyper masculinity, right? Where it goes to where men are trying to now go to this other route where, now they have men that are doing, oh goodness, what is it? The surgeries, the plastic surgery to get like fake muscles put in because they want to now look like it's a real thing. You all should look it up. It's on YouTube. It's a real thing. People are getting like muscles put in, and they're putting like to appear more manly, right? Because they feel like they're not man enough. So it's this pressure we put on each other, and it goes back to what we talked about weight and everything. And we do go to some different darker places, right? Trying to make up for that, right? And I will admit, I'm very transparent about this. When my children were a lot younger, I was one of those people like, you all right, get up, right? Because I was raised that, we were always taught men are supposed to be men, right? So I have 4 boys, and I'm like, I want them to be tough because this world is tough, and I want them to be able to make it. And, I had to too learn that there's a balance with all of this, right? And I learned it, thank goodness, but there was a time where I thought like that too. I would be totally transparent because that was the culture I grew up in. So let's get to this because this is good. I love this. When do you all think that it's safe for a man to kind of be himself? Do you feel like sometimes, because right now I feel like personally there is a war on people just being themselves, right? There is a war right now where, even a war on the family unit where people are promoting like, you don't need to be in a family, everybody can just kind of wing it, on their own. And, and really we need community. We need some kind of family structure. It's a lot of things that are kind of being challenged right now. What do you all think about it? I don't want to ramble, so what do you all think? What do you all think? Do you think that there's a war right now on people just kind of being themselves? And I want to get to the addiction side too of things and how we can kind of push people to that direction. But do y'all think it's a war right now on just people being who they are?
I think there's so much hatred out there, coming from everywhere, right? And we project that on ourselves, so automatically we don't want to be vulnerable. Like, who wants to be vulnerable? Even thinking about like even your friends, right? Some of your friends, people don't even want to be vulnerable to, because then we're put in a position where we could be judged, and why even break that shell open, right? It goes back to what I did when relapsed when my grandparents died. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I'm not supposed to be. Just gonna avoid the pain and
So this is a mental well-being issue, and that's a huge issue right now. We had a panel at our Rotary meeting, and one of the things they noted is that there's a lot of men suffering depression and mental health issues, and men are 10 times less likely to seek help.
Why do you think that is?
It's because our society has put this pressure on them to be tough and just tough it out and everything, and not to admit that you're
even
struggling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to ask for help. And so they struggle alone.
Yeah.
And help can be out there, but they're unwilling to go seek it.
Yeah.
And they don't always get the encouragement to seek help.
Yeah.
And so it's a real issue, I don't know what the answer is because it's coming from society, and how do you change society so that people don't feel terrible about saying, look, I'm depressed, I'm struggling, I need help.
Yeah. And sometimes that just like going for coffee or something, right? I know for me, you know, if I'm sitting there and just kind of talking through whatever, right? That's therapeutic for me, right? And I think sometimes we have to create those spaces like the Breaking Bread Village where we can come and, you know, where we can come and, you know, talk about things openly without that judgment, right? So very quickly, I want to kind of talk about, and not to skip over it, but I want to make sure we touch on this, you know, because you talked about the eating disorder and addiction, right? Those are real cause and effects, right, of what we're talking about. When we put this pressure on people, you talked about social media and what you see, and, you know, people don't realize, you know, sometimes they have 1,000 filters. Those people don't look like that, you know, and, you know, they use Photoshop and things like that, and then some of them do. And we judge ourselves based on that. So, I mean, Adam, if you don't mind, I mean, because you brought it up, I just want to know more about that side of things because, first of all, I want to say congratulations to you. I think that,
Thank you.
yeah, I think that's great. I think you're proud of that, first of all. And then secondly, you know, I think that we pinpoint other people's addictions, but we all have addictions, right? I mean, we do. We have addictions that we don't talk about. Like we talked about, sometimes food is an addiction. Sometimes overworking out can be an addiction, right? When you just are just going crazy. So talk a little bit more about how that was kind of like a self-medicating thing as opposed to getting a therapy or going to talk with somebody.
Yeah, and I think, so I think a lot of people's addictions stem from trauma, right? And to define trauma is a very, very internal and personal experience. For me, a lot of it was loss of loved ones. I internalized all that stuff. So what's trauma for me, maybe, you know, someone else is easily able to process. There's events that, something that might be really easy for me to process that is traumatic to someone else. And then when we're not vulnerable and we don't get out and, like you said, have coffee with a friend or seek a therapist, go talk to a pastor, someone, it's just someone to go talk to. If we don't get this stuff off our hearts, then it can wear on us. And people will fill that void, cover it up with work. When people think of addiction, mostly it's drugs, alcohol, right?
Right.
It's not just that. It's addiction in general is symptom, right? It's a behavior, usually self-preserving type of behavior that stems from something else. So like in my situation, I had to go through treatment, inpatient rehab up at Harbor Hall, and I had to dig in and really find out, like, what is this trauma that led me, the root. And I got back to when it was a phone call, right? My dad, he just up and left. I didn't even see him. I was supposed to go bowling with him, and he just up and left. Called me, said, I'm not gonna be able to pick you up. I have to leave. I'm moving out of state. And I didn't hear from him for 4 years. So when I got to that point, and I was just like, that's literally where all this started. I was able to start the healing process. And so 7 years chemical free is like, it's because I dug in.
Yes, we love to see it.
I love that. I love it. Anybody else want to add anything to that? Anybody else want to add?
I agree that most anything you're going to talk about, eating disorder or substance abuse, you know, I went to the therapist and we didn't talk about food for like, I don't know, 8 months or something. And I remember being like, when are we going to get to that part? And she's like, that's not the issue. And it turns out I think that's how it is for a lot of people. And in my ideal world, the solution would be that everyone has a therapist from day one.
I think we should make going to therapy more of like going and getting your blood work done
Yes,
every year.
have a doctor, have a therapist.
Why don't we
everyone.
take care of the mind like we do the body?
Agreed.
No, it's true. That's true. that's true. That goes back to that system we were talking about, healthcare, all that stuff. That is a whole nother beast. So, thank you. Did you want to add anything, Marissa?
I'm good.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Tara. Anna. Okay. So we kind of touched on it earlier, but social media, right? I just want to kind of talk about that a little bit more in our couple minutes before we have our audience participation. But social media, right? It is a beast. It is a beast. And quite honestly, just to be totally transparent, if I didn't have to use it for this, I probably wouldn't be on it, right? It only benefits me to market, of course, but then also, you know, to connect with people that maybe I haven't seen in a while. So that's a positive. But it is a lot. It's a lot of times. And how do you think that social media has truly like impacted the things that we're talking about right now, right? I mean, I know we touched on it a little bit, but how do you think that it has, especially in the last couple of years, I mean, I think it's like just ramping up, right? Because social media has been around for a while. I think people say it as if it just kind of came. It's been around for a long time. But how do you think it's really impacting people? Because I think about people in college, high school students. You know, when I talk to kids, the stuff they're worried about breaks my heart. I'm like, why are you worried about that? You know what I mean? You're 11 years old, you're 15 years old, you're 20 years old. Why are you worried about that? And they base it off of what they see off of social media. So go ahead, Marissa.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of judgment, like, in social media. Like, it doesn't matter, like, what platform. Like, I feel like there's a lot of, like, judgment when it comes to social media. Like, you know, like, this is wrong with you, or this, what you posted, like, the comments, the likes, like, who liked my post, who posted this. Like, there's a lot of stigma around social media, like, the differences between, like, apps and, like, how, like, diverse people are, and, like, the inclusivity, like, how people are, like, taking attack on it. And, like, it really opens up perspectives of, like, who they are, because, like, you know, cyberbullying is, like, definitely, like, a big factor of that. Like, I mean, like, you know, you could see someone face to face, like, different than social media. Like, that's two different people right there. I mean, they're the same person, but you could have someone online being someone different than someone in real life. Like, you never know. Like, you don't trust it. So.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add to that about social media?
I think it's social media is very, very manipulative, because you know you could get sent down a rabbit hole on YouTube by clicking on the wrong link.
Yes, I mean, tell me about it.
You're sitting there and you accidentally click on, you know, rubber stamps, and all of a sudden, every time you open up the page, rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. Like,
Yeah.
and it takes you weeks to get rid of it. But, you know, it also can be conducive to the other end. If you are listening to motivational speakers, then you get nothing but motivation. You know, you talk about social media being around for a while. Years ago, you know, you couldn't get into a forum unless you knew somebody, because there's so much positive information being shifted around. Now, forums are open and anybody can get into them. And one of the things that really grind me about it is there's always somebody in there with an opinion that has nothing to do with the subject. Everybody's in there talking about coffee cups, coffee cups, coffee cups. Somebody comes in, I don't only drink out of a glass. Well, nobody asked you about a glass, go away.
Right.
You know, but it's, you know, it's just, it gives, a smartphone gives a dumb person a voice.
There, well, there you have it. That is the truth. That is the truth.
I'd
Yes.
like to add one thing.
Yes, please.
I'm for social media when it's utilized as a springboard. I'm against social media when it's utilized as a crutch.
Explain to me more about the crutch part.
Well, I think that that sometimes people can post like, oh, I've got this terrible hangnail and it's so bad, and then everyone jumps on, but oh, I had one yesterday and it's just awful and mine was bleeding and stuff. So what happens is it takes you down a downward spiral that doesn't go to a good place. When it involves people inspiring and encouraging other people, it's like, wow, look what happened. It's like, that's so awesome. You know, how'd you do it? I want to do that too. So So it can be utilized for different ways, good and bad. And I think that right now, social media is going to go through a huge change that none of us are anticipating because of AI. And AI is going to change the way social media impacts our lives. And, you know, we're going to have to go through a learning curve. To be honest, social media is one of those classes that we should include in middle school and high school and everything, and there should be teachers training us how to properly utilize it as a positive thing in our life. And we don't have that. Our society hasn't recognized that, and we should probably have some training for this so that people use it appropriately.
Yeah. It's so hard to find a balance, right? It's like, you know, if you post all the good things, right, and you just sound like this positive force, right? People say, well, why are you always, you know, your life can't be that perfect, right? And then if you post something that is real, like I got a hangnail and I, you know, I'm suffering today, and it's hurt, because those things hurt. I mean, they're so little, but they hurt. And, you know, and if you post about that, then it's like, oh, here she comes complaining, right? It's like you can't find that balance. And then some people really, I feel like, seek validation through social media. So it's like if they say, you know, this is the classic one, and I'm not trying, but you know, it's like, please pray for me. And then it's like, well, for what? What's happening? You know, then it's like, but don't ask me, just pray. It's like, okay, girl, you just wanted, you know, you just wanted some attention. No, that's not everybody, but I'm being silly. But it seems like people use it sometimes just to get that attention and that validation to feel like, okay, people do care about me out there. When sometimes it's not real. You know what I mean? It's not real. So I just always wonder, how do people find that balance?
You know what it's not? It's not this.
Yes.
And you just talked about meeting for coffee. Meeting for coffee is so powerful. Social media is a false sense of security, or it's just not, it doesn't develop friendship, it doesn't develop connection, and it doesn't deepen relationships.
Because context is lost, right?